virtual viewers. For all my virtual viewers out there, if you have any questions, please put your question in the chat box, and my team will make sure that your questions are answered live here up on the stage. So today I have Merlin Namuth. Namuth, like Joe Namath?
Like Joe Namath, yep.
All right, Merlin Namuth. Any relation?
No relation.
Oh, bummer. Okay. He is the Chief Information Security Officer for REPAY, Realtime Electronic Payments. He's an accomplished security leader with 26 years of IT experience, with the past 23 years focused on information security. He started his career on hands-on systems and network administrative roles and worked his way up to building and leading security programs in small to medium-sized companies. In addition, he architected and engineered multi-million-dollar complex security solutions spanning several global locations. His passions include continuous improvement of security programs and creating healthy, productive teams. He has years of experience working with executive and senior leadership, including company owners. He not only enjoys landing security teams and working with the business and security initiatives, but to stay current with the emerging security technologies. Today, he's going to speak on truths, myths, and maybes. So let's all welcome Merlin Namuth.
Thanks, Kim. All right, so how is everyone doing? How were the sessions this morning? Everyone enjoy those? Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming. So I wanted to give you a little introduction here before I dive into my presentation of Truths, Myths, and Maybes. About a year ago, I started a blog on LinkedIn, and I post there about once a month. And I pick a topic in cybersecurity that it'll make more sense once I go into these. You'll be like, oh yeah, I've heard some of those things being said. And I think that, as time goes on, there's some misinformation, and people keep propagating some of those that misinformation. And so in my blog, I'm just tackling those, and I've taken the content of my blog and made it into a presentation for you today. So as we know, there's a lot of people in our industry with various skills and experience. I was having some conversations, just before, and it depends on the type of environment you're in, because your perspective might be different, because every environment is different, and how you apply security in those environments is also very different. And but with that, then we have some of the misconceptions of not only those in our industry, but also as with business leaders. That I find that there's still a lot of business leaders who see security as you just do security. But one of the things I want to dive into here is that security does so much more than just securing the organization. In our roles, it is really important for us to earn trust with our peers, with individual contributors, the stakeholders, and business leaders. And part of that is to be accurate in the information that we convey. If you're spreading misinformation, those people are going to fact check you. They're going to go out and they're going to ask ChatGPT, or so maybe you want to ask ChatGPT yourself first before you start saying something. But it is important for us to be accurate, so you earn that trust. If they fact check you and find that you're way off base on something, you're not going to have that trust. And then also another part of our job is salesmanship. Whether you're a leader, I'm currently CISO of REPAY. Everybody on my team is a salesperson. We have to sell our ideas to the business leaders, stakeholders, individual contributors, because as it's no surprise to any of you, that when we implement security technologies, processes, whatever, it's very disruptive to the organization. Who here has started day one when the company was founded and started implementing security on day one? Yeah, nobody, of course. So security is always after the fact. Hopefully you're soon after the company started, but I have yet to meet anybody who's really done that very often. So salesmanship is a really important aspect. So this is going to be some audience participation. So after the good meal that you had, might wake you up a little bit here. So with that, I'm going to dive into the first truth, myth, or maybe. HR creates unrealistic job descriptions. How many here has heard this before? Yeah, probably at least a third of the people in the room, for those of you who are virtual. And I've heard this a lot by people. And as we know, we have a shortage of cybersecurity professionals. Those of us who are hiring managers, we know that. It's hard to find people to be able to fill those roles. But some of those conversations range from not enough people going into the field. And I've also heard people who are trying to break into the field saying it's actually very difficult to get into the field, which it really bothers me because we all started somewhere in our careers. We all started as junior level people, and we had to gain more experience to be able to become better at our roles. So, but an aspect of this that I wanted to focus on is just being able to find the talent. As I said, I've heard people many times say that one of the obstacles is HR. They say that HR creates job descriptions that are unrealistic for a position, such as requiring 10 years of experience for a role that maybe only 2 to 4 years are required. Or I know Mohammed here. I know he'd appreciate this, but 20 years of cloud experience. When the cloud hasn't been around that long, has it, Mohammed? No, he's shaking his head no. Mohammed's on the panel this afternoon. He's a great guy. He and I have known each other for a long time, so that's why I'm picking on him today. But so I thought long and hard about this, and I'm like, I don't agree with that because every time that I've hired somebody on my team, I've written my own job descriptions. Now HR approves them, and they might give some feedback to it, but by and large, I'm the one who's specifying the skills needed and the years of experience I'm looking for those roles. I did speak recently with a colleague who said that HR got more involved in his job description, and it actually caused a lot of problems with him trying to fill that role. Now, it sounds like I'm picking on HR. I mean, HR does have a function, and we can really utilize HR in our hiring because they have access to resources, so you don't have to create your job description from scratch. That's definitely something I don't want to do. I've never done that, actually, create a job description from scratch, and they have the resources to help you with that. And then also, we all go out to LinkedIn and Indeed, and we find similar roles, and we pull information out of those job descriptions to add to our job descriptions as well. So coming back to HR creates unrealistic job descriptions. Is this a truth, myth, or a maybe? I would say that by and large that this is a myth because we create our own job descriptions. Now I know that there are some outliers out there where HR creates the job descriptions for you. You don't have a choice, but I believe that by and large that this is a myth. Okay, who here has heard this? Especially those who are CISOs or security leaders, that boards don't want to hear the technical details when you present to them. Who here has heard that before? About a third of the room. I think the other 2/3 is still eating or asleep after their meal already. But yeah, so and this is a skill. It's a skill that I have to have as a CISO to report to the board committee once a quarter. But presenting to the board knows who you're talking to. The recommendations I've heard on presenting to the board often include statements such as, boards don't want to hear the tactical planning, just the strategic planning. And then they want to hear about the end result, but not the steps that actually get there. So if you're deploying an EDR solution, they just want to know that's deployed. They don't want to know that, hey, it's going to take me 6 months to be able to get this deployed. And then, just coming back to the boards just aren't technical, so they don't want to hear any of the technical details. Generalizations and assumptions can land you into trouble. I think we all know that. When I hear statements like these, I think about a major concept. So again, I'm going back to my blog that I did, and I was really thinking about this because I still hear people saying this, and lots of webinars that I've seen on presenting to the board, they often say this. It goes back to my freshman college English course, actually probably the fall semester. So my first English course as a freshman of what's the major concept? Know your audience. And when we make generalizations that the board doesn't want to hear the technical details, we're not considering that, well, maybe the board does want to hear those. I've presented to board committees that are very technical, and I've presented to ones that only wanted to hear the strategic details. So now here's where it can be a little tricky if when you start working at a new company as a leader, as a CISO, or if you're in another position where you actually present to the board, of how do you know what this board is like? What do they want to hear? And I've been in that position. I was in that position at REPAY when I needed to present to the board for the first time. And what I recommend that you do is talk with your CEO, talk with your CFO, CTO, head of HR, those who have actually presented to the board committee, and ask them, what is this board interested in? What level of detail do they want to know? And this has really helped me, because when you present to the, first impressions do really matter, especially when you present to the board. So you want your first presentation to them to really be effective, and they take you seriously. And so I wanted to go a little bit further into presenting to the board committee. So some of you may be headed to doing that the first time. And so what I recommend is that not only should you know your material, you should also anticipate, so look at your material and be like, what questions would someone potentially ask me? And prepare your answers ahead of time. Because then that way, when they do ask you those questions, your answers are going to be crisp, and the board is going to notice that you're not hesitating, that you have an answer right away for that. You still may be asked questions that you don't anticipate. It's okay to say that you need to check into it and get back to them with the answer for that. But of course, you don't want that to be the answer for every question they ask you. One time I was in a board meeting and I cracked a joke, and I think everybody was shocked that I cracked a joke. But they're people. You should take the meeting seriously, but not too seriously. And so they got to kind of see a lighter side of me in that. And then the last point I wanted to say about with presenting to the board is that you want to build a relationship with your board members. So keep in mind that a lot of the board members are also members of boards of other companies. And so those other companies may not have a CISO, they may not even have a cybersecurity program. And so you can really help them be successful in those other board committees by sharing cybersecurity information with them. Help them be successful. And when you do that, then that just builds the relationship that you have with your own company, and that they're the board members of. So coming back to boards don't want the technical details. So I guess we can add a little more audience participation. Who thinks that this is true? After I said all that. Okay, so we have a few people. Who thinks that this is a myth? A few people. How about a maybe? Yep. And that's where I land on this as well. That's a maybe, because some boards do want the technical details and some don't. And it's really up to you to figure out what they really want. Okay, so the next one, you need cybersecurity certifications to have a career in cybersecurity. How many people have heard this before? Yeah, a majority of the room. And so one aspect of this, one side of the argument of this is that you need several cybersecurity certifications to be effective, to land a job, or to be taken seriously in your role. There are arguments both for and against this, as well as there are strong opinions of whether or not you should maintain those certifications. Twice in my career, I've moved into a job because of a certification I had. But was it really the certification I had, or was it the knowledge I gained by studying for that certification and I was able to apply that knowledge? I think it was probably more that was actually having the certification. Like many people, I've been in my career for a long time. I've had a number of certifications over the course of my career, and I've let them expire, like my MCSE on NT 4.0. I don't think I need that anymore. So yeah, that's been long expired. I still maintain a few of them because of, quite frankly, what took to earn some of those. I mean, some of them were difficult to pass and to be able to get that certification. And some because it forces me to stay current with the information in that. So again, audience participation. So who here has their CISSP and you're clamoring to retake that exam? Nobody wants to retake. Yeah, me neither. I would not want to do that. I've heard that's much different than what it was when I took it back in the early 2000s, but I definitely wouldn't want to take that again. I also have my PMP, my project management certification, and I don't really need that for my current role as a CISO, but it was a very difficult exam for me to pass, and I just don't want it to lapse. I'll let lapse when I retire, but I still maintain that. And also, just sharing a little bit of my experience, I also maintain a few SAN certifications because in my CISO role, I'm not hands-on technical. But maintaining those certifications helps me be able to keep up to date with some of the technical aspects that those certifications address. A few years ago, about 3 years ago, I took several AWS and Azure courses and the associated certification exams. I did that not because of the certification exams. I did the certifications because it forced me to dive into the material and really learn the material in order to pass the exam. And so therefore I have better knowledge with that and retained it better. those certifications may have expired by now. I don't know. I don't really care. I'm going to let them expire, but I just did that to force me into learn that. Well, that's awesome. The bagpipes came to that's pretty cool. I have to say that some of the bagpipe stuff is actually kind of cool. So the bagpipes to rock songs, I've kind of gotten into that a little bit this year. So you can go look it up. But there's some pretty cool people out there. Anyhow, so as a hiring manager, I do look at certifications that people have on their resumes. It helps me understand some level of knowledge that they may have. And I say may because there's a lot of people who just run through certifications like crazy and they don't really apply that knowledge. But that comes out in the interview. I'll ask them questions specific to that particular certification that they have. And if they're not able to answer, then I know that they really haven't applied that knowledge, that they were just after getting the certification. So, getting certification, as I think we'd all agree, is one thing, and that is an achievement for sure. Especially some of these harder exams like CISSP or PMP, but applying it on a job, takes that much further. So, who here thinks that you need cybersecurity certifications to be effective and taken seriously? So, who thinks that this is true? Yeah, everybody's kind of on the. So, how about a myth? Yeah, we have some myths, and then maybes. Yeah, so kind of equally split between myths and maybes, and that's kind of where I land as well. All right. If your environment is compliant, I work for a payments company, so PCI is a big one for us. So if I have a passing PCI ROC, that means I'm secure. How many people have heard this before, that if you pass your compliance audit, that you're secure? Yeah, I've heard. Surprisingly enough, I actually know a number of CISOs who fully run their programs that way. I think that's a little scary, personally, because I land more of that. I still use the compliance angle because for my organization, for example, we have, my company is made up of several acquisitions, 11 acquisitions since 2019. And so we do separate PCI assessments, SOC 1, SOC 2s for all that. And we also have HIPAA and ICFR because we're a publicly traded company. I see some people shaking their head. Yes, it's a challenge for sure, but I do enjoy the challenge. So between all that, we have 35 reports a year that we have to do. So compliance is a huge thing for my organization. And like many CISOs, there are a number of standards that I've had to learn and make sure that my organizations pass. And not passing some of those, like being a payments company, if we don't have a passing PCI ROC, that's pretty bad. I mean, that could be as bad as having a breach, actually. Our customers could completely lose confidence in what we're doing. So it's, and I'm only, referring to PCI because that's why I deal with the most in my current organization, even though we have SOC 1, SOC 2. But, it can be damaging to us, not only in our reputation, but also with financial penalties for not having a passing PCI assessment. Customers lose their confidence, take their business elsewhere. So, I think everybody would agree that, compliance is important in the security program. But I think, based on when I first introduced this topic, it doesn't go far enough in securing the organization. In the past, I've obtained funding for particular security initiatives by saying, we need this to pass our PCI assessment. However, this is a slippery slope. So, what if you want to increase something in security and it's not specifically called out in PCI, for example? So this is one of my pet peeves with PCI. So for those of you who deal with PCI, you'll know this, and it might be one of your pet peeves as well, is that PCI states we must have logs for 12 months, right? Well, it stops there. It doesn't say what you actually have to do with logs. Like, great, you have 12 months worth of logs. It's like, well, big deal. It's like, you actually need to do something with that. So if you rely solely on, we have to have this because of compliance reasons, and you say, hey, we need to go buy a SIM, they're going, the stakeholders or the people writing the checks might call you out on that and say, well, PCI doesn't actually require that you have that, so we're not going to approve that. So that's the slippery slope. You have to balance that with compliance requires this, but we also need to do this step further to be able to properly secure our organization. And it is the role of CISOs to make sure that the organization is both compliant, as I said, that customers want to see that, and also because of financial penalties you can have, but also you need to be secure. Okay, so coming back to this. If you're compliant, you're secure. How many people think that is true? Nobody. That's great. I'm glad. If someone raised their hand, I might have to talk with you afterwards. And then how many think that this is a myth? Yeah, about half the room, or a little more than half the room. And then maybe this is true. Yeah, no maybes. So, again, compliance, I'm picking on compliance. I think it's a good minimum standard to have. It's a good place to start because, like when I started at REPAY, I'm the first CISO for the organization. And it's like, where do you start? And so having compliance to be able to fall back onto, that does help you develop your roadmap and what you need to address. Security awareness training reduces risk. How many people think that this is true? Okay. Yep, a few people. A myth? Okay, a few people, and maybe. Okay, yep, more people believe that that's a maybe. Okay, well, let's see how the numbers change after I go into describing why I brought this topic up. So some people are like, security awareness training greatly reduces the organization's risk. Everybody's clamoring to help keep the organization secure, and they just need to have the tools and the knowledge on how to do so. Others take the approach that the training is needed for compliance reasons, but we can't trust our users, so we still have to have security tools in place because they're not always going to make the right decisions. As we know, our employees are required to take annual awareness training on various topics such as phishing emails, removal of media, creating safeguarding complex passwords, Wi-Fi, and using mobile devices in a secure manner. I have to say, over the course of my career, that I've been doing security for almost 24 years now, that the training has greatly matured over the years, which I'm glad for. It really needed to mature. And some of the training also includes gamification to make learning fun and appealing, so it's supposed to be more engaging for people. As a result, most people can describe what a phishing email is. And as a sidebar, I think that this is a success for all of us and everybody in information security or cybersecurity, whichever way you want to refer to it, that most people in the general public know what a phishing email is. That's great. We want people to know, and most people know at least some rudimentary things that they can check for to check if it's a phishing email. That's a great success. I'm so glad for that because phishing email is, as we all know, that's like one of the biggest vectors for someone getting compromised. For years, I've taken the approach that security awareness training isn't as effective as we'd like it to be because we're just telling people what to do. Who here likes to just be told what to do? Yeah, nobody. Me neither. And here's where I'm really coming from with that is that we're just telling people you must have a strong, complex password, or you should not click on a phishing email. But the training stops short there, and it doesn't describe. Here's what could happen if you click on a phishing email, that your system gets compromised, and then the attacker's on your system, and then they're doing reconnaissance on the rest of your network and finding out where the crown jewels live, and then going after attacking that. The training stops short there. It doesn't really show people the ramifications of their actions. So if we do that, will that really be effective? I would say no. And here's why. So recently, I visited Volcanoes National Park in Hawaii. How many people have been there before? Yeah, a few people. Do you remember seeing signs like this along the paths? So for those of you in the back who may not be able to see this, it says, "Caution, stay on trails, beware of steam vents, earth cracks, and cliffs." So that's pretty strong wording because what can happen for those of you who haven't been there is that you're on the path and the ground looks like just normal vegetation growing, but you could step out on that and there's a steam vent hidden underneath it and you'll fall through and get seriously injured, get burned. So there's these signs everywhere along the paths. And there was even a placard along one of the paths that we were on that included a recent story of a young child getting seriously injured for going off trail and getting burned by the steam from the vent. Still, while I was hiking, and where my wife and I were hiking, it wasn't really a hike, it's a walking path, we saw a number of tourists going off the path and getting their beloved selfies because the selfie was more important than adhering to the caution and the risk that was described to them. I think we kind of run into that with our security awareness training. It's like, people go through that, but there's still going to be a number of people who go off trail and say, oh, this will be fine. Oh, I'll be fine. We're not going to get burned. The organization will be fine. I wanted to also expand a little bit on the security awareness training. What about doing various education campaigns throughout the year, such as like October? October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. CISA has a lot of free resources, great resources that you can use. So one time when I started a job right before October. And so I didn't have time to really prepare much for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So I spoke with our CEO, and I'm like, hey, would you be willing to record a video on what cybersecurity means to you and personally and to the organization? And he agreed to that. And so I worked with marketing, who had a creative person on their team who recorded a video, and we distributed it across the organization to all employees. The following year, I worked with the same creative person, and she worked with the executives to create TikTok-style videos of the executives acting out some sort of security concept. So the concept, like, for example, of the head of HR found a USB drive on the ground. She picked it up, held it like this, like it was poison, dropped it in a trash can, and saying it was so cringe. And another one was tailgaters following somebody into the office, and the COO was like, nope, no way, we're not going to allow that. So the executives had a lot of fun with it. I think it helped drive home the message, several messages to the organization that, first, the executives care about security, and also that the executives can have some fun. And so they got to see kind of a more personal side of the executives. So I still have the video. I thought it turned out really well. And we distributed that across the organization. Okay, so going back to this, that security awareness training reduces risk. How many people think that this is true? Yep, several people think that's true. Is it a myth? Yeah, I don't think it's a myth either. Maybe. Yeah, and I think that for those of you who think it's a maybe, it's because you're never going to get 100% buy-in from people. You're going to always have people going off trail, thinking that they'll be just fine, and then they fall through a Steam vent or click on a phishing email. Okay. Security is only an overhead cost to the organization. How many people have heard this? Yeah, several people. So one side of that is that that is an overhead cost to the company, and it stops there. It is necessary to have a security program in many companies to protect against malicious things from happening. We all know that. I mean, we all work in security. That's why we have jobs. Our organizations feel like that's important to them. Some believe that information security can be a business enabler. And I'm on that side because I've actually used security as a business enabler, which I'll describe here. Passing compliance audits, for example, gives customers the confidence to do business with your company. If you don't have passing compliance audits, they're going to be like, well, I'm not sure if my information is really secure there, and might take their business elsewhere. As we all know, labor costs are high, and the numbers of qualified and experienced practitioners are low, versus the job openings. Security tools are very expensive. We all know that, and it may require several solutions to be able to address your different risk areas. However, those of you who have been through a breach, which I won't ask you to raise your hands, but probably majority of you have been through a breach before, that a breach is very expensive. You have the cost of investigating the breach. You have mitigations, which may include having to actually purchase a security tool to mitigate that, or multiple security tools. I've been in that boat before. Labor cost of the victim company is to work the incident, and a particular breach that I had, and I won't name the company where I was at, we had to stop all development work because the attackers had actually gotten into development environment as well, so we couldn't trust our code. So all work stopped until we worked that incident and got control over that. There's potentially lost revenue for your organization and negative impact to the company's reputation. While an overhead cost to the company, an information security program may help avoid greater costs to the company. Who here has heard the information security compared to a firehouse? Oh, not very many people. Oh, this is fun. So I heard this illustration early in my career. So when you think of a firehouse, they're spending lots of money on personnel, training those personnel, and the equipment to properly staff that firehouse, and then it's the waiting game. Then they're just waiting for something to happen. That may or may not happen. Now, chances are something is going to happen, and that's why the powers to be funded that fire station to with all the tools and personnel. But cybersecurity is a lot the same way. If we have personnel, we have tools in place, waiting for something to happen, or hopefully our tools are proactive and actually prevent something from happening. But it's kind of that. I still think that illustration really applies well still with cybersecurity where we're at. So going back to where security was a business enabler, so early in my career, I purchased an enterprise data loss prevention system, a DLP system. And at the time, so this was before we have like some of our current technologies where we're able to mask credit card numbers. So employees in our company had full access and could see the full credit card numbers. And when we implemented the tool, we found some of our employees were emailing those credit card numbers to their personal email accounts, and then they were making fraudulent purchases with those credit card numbers. So of course, within a week, a few people actually lost their jobs right away because of that. So I went to sales and I'm like, hey, here's this tool, here's what it does, and you need to tell our customers about it. And also, by the way, when you're drumming up new business, tell those customers that we're using this technology. And that actually helped us to land some new clients because of that. So potential customers want assurances that if they do business with your company, that their information will be safeguarded. If they, and I've talked about this several times, if they see exceptions in your SOC reports, if they see a failed PCI audit, for example, they'll take their business elsewhere. So I believe that security has moved from being only an overhead cost to a business enabler for many companies. So who here thinks that security is only overhead cost after hearing this? Is this true? A myth? Some people think it's still a myth. Yep, and maybe. Yep, I kind of land that's on kind of between a myth and a maybe, because there's still several security programs out there that have not aligned themselves with the business. And so security programs that are more aligned with the business are then also more business enablers. Okay, so this one, security team's only benefit is security. And you're like, what are you talking about, Merlin? That sounds kind of strange. So I won't ask for raising hands, because I'm sure people are a little confused by this statement. So let me go into this and explain what I mean by this. So as we know, information security programs focus on protecting confidentiality, integrity, and availability of systems and data. This is accomplished in part by installing security tools and securing environments. We all know that. Some believe that this is the only benefit a security program has to an organization. As security practitioners know and have experienced, it is very disruptive to add security controls and processes to an organization after an environment has been built and put in production. However, I believe that security can be a driver to help improve the overall hygiene and stability of environments. Introducing something as simple as a password policy that requires a minimum of 12 characters, a symbol, a number, capital letter, whatever, is easy enough to implement in an organization, right? I don't see anybody shaking their head yes. Usually this isn't the case. Most organizations have critical legacy systems that may not even support that long of a password. And, does your password policy also include your service accounts? Well, that's a whole another layer of complexity to add to that. So, changing passwords to 12 characters in that could break your applications. So there's been several times in my career where I was able to improve the stability and hygiene of systems and environments with security projects. One such project I had was to harden servers. IT was like completely on board with this, and we had hardening scripts that we wanted to run on the servers and be able to shut down unnecessary ports and services running on those systems. And so we're going to go through the typical, okay, we're going to apply it to the development environment first, then we'll move to QA, and then if everything looks okay, then we'll move to production. IT came to me and said, well, we really like that plan, but we're not backing up our dev and QA systems, so if the hardening script does something wonky, which is a technical term, to those systems, they have no way to recover without rebuilding those systems from scratch. So I asked them, like, well, why is it that you're not backing those up? And they're like, well, we don't have enough capacity in our backup solution. And so I asked them to go get a quote as to how much it would cost to add that capacity to the backup solution. They came back to me and they said it was like 25 grand. I'm like, well, that's nothing for my security budget. I said, I'll just pay for that. They're like, really? They were shocked. I'm like, yeah, no, I want to pay for that because it helps you and it also helps me, because then we can move forward with a security project to be able to harden these systems. So not only was I able to accomplish what I wanted to from a security standpoint, I also built that relationship or strengthened that relationship even further with IT, because they saw that I have their back, that security isn't just there to make their jobs hard, that we're in this together, and so I was helping them as well. So while this is a very specific example, I'll go on a limb and say that security improves hygiene all the time. Patches not only address security issues, but also system issues. It could be system performance issues. Running on latest versions of software and operating system often improves the stability. It doesn't always, but it often does. Hardening systems can improve the performance of running fewer services. Reducing tech debt helps make these environments easier for IT and cloud teams to manage them. Okay, so now I'll ask for the audience participation on this. So security teams only benefit security. How many people believe that is true? Okay, nobody. How many people think that that's a myth? Several people. And a maybe? Yep. And a few people for a maybe. Okay, great. Okay, next one. You must have the latest security tools. How many people believe this is true? How about a myth? Okay, myth. How about maybe? Okay, majority say maybe. So you don't have to go far to find a company that has experienced a data breach due to an unpatched vulnerability, misconfiguration, or an unsuspecting employee who wasn't paying attention to their security awareness training and clicked on a phishing email. Some believe it is more important to focus on the latest security technologies and not so much on the, quote, basics. A few weeks ago, I was at the RSA security conference, and we were inundated with hundreds of security vendors on expo floor saying that we need to have their latest, greatest tools. Are these tools really necessary? So a few years ago, I was having lunch with a local CISO peer, and we were discussing the security basics. As we dove deeper in this topic, he and I both agreed that we as an industry are approaching this in the wrong manner. When you call something basic, you're kind of referring to, well, it must be easy to do, or maybe it's not necessary to actually implement that. So in that lunch discussion, he and I instead of calling things basic, he and I both agreed that we should use maybe a term like foundational, that you need to build a foundation, like you need to have good patching in place, for example. So like, attaining or coming close to being 100% patched, as we know, is not an easy task. First, you have to know all your hardware and software assets. Man, knowing all your inventory, that's hard enough, and that's a huge project in and of itself. Especially like my company that is made up of several different acquisitions. It's very difficult to know all of our hardware and software assets. We're working on that, and we're pretty close to where I feel like we're comfortable, but it's very difficult to get there. And then you have to successfully apply the patches, which doesn't always go smoothly, as we know. And then you have those exceptions because of running on legacy systems that you just cannot apply the patch. Like when PHP 8 came out, it's like you had to restructure some of your applications to be able to support that. It was a major change, for example. So, and then, how many people have been in this situation where you have two identical systems and a patch applies perfectly on one and it breaks the other system? Yeah, I think it's happened to all of us. And you're scratching your head trying to figure out what's going on. And then, so it takes a lot of effort to be able to figure that out so that way you can get that system up and running with the latest patch. As we talked about, just knowing all your assets is a long, complicated process. And then given the rise of remote workers, it can be even more difficult to be able to reach those systems to be able to patch them. So about the new security technologies, some of them help with the foundational security elements. Some of them focus on emerging issues. It is a balance of making sure your foundational components are in place and functioning well while addressing evolving security challenges. Don't get me wrong, because there are times where you really do need to have some of those emerging technologies, and you have the emerging issues, and you need some of those latest technologies. So who here has heard of a CSPM? A few people. So that stands for Cloud Security Posture Management. It is a relatively recent concept. If you're in the cloud, this is something you might want to consider having so you have the visibility into your cloud to be able to secure it. Okay, so coming back to, you must have the latest security tools. How many people believe this is true? Nobody. All right. How many think that this is a myth? How about a maybe? Okay, majority of the room is a maybe. And I agree with that because sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. And going back to an earlier statement I made that every environment is different and how you approach securing that environment is different. So you might need the latest emerging tool, maybe you don't. All right, trust us, we are security. How many think that this is true? Yeah, nobody. Myth? Or maybe? Maybe. Okay. So as we know, part of the responsibility of security teams is to help employees make the right decisions to keep the company safe. It's important for employees to self-report issues, whether they accidentally clicked on a phishing email or an observation that they noticed the environment. Like you want your sysadmins to be like, hey, I noticed this over here, or a DBA to say, if they noticed something and bring it to your attention. But shouldn't employees just know that they should engage the security team? I mean, shouldn't it just come automatically? Or how should the security team respond when employees contact them? Because, since I've been in this industry for a long time, it's like I've seen security teams get that really wrong, and they completely destroy that trust, any level of trust that they have with that organization with employees in it. Early in my career, I often heard people complain that security departments only tell people what they can't do. Those teams were often viewed as impediments to people getting their jobs done, rather than coming alongside and working with them to come up with a solution that satisfies the business need and doing it in a secure manner. Now, I often see security departments more as business enablers. And again, it comes back to security teams that are aligned to the business. I see those teams as business enablers. The security teams collaborate with internal teams to find secure solutions to their business problems. Security teams are faced with a dilemma. Initially, the work is reactive because you have to tell users what they should do and not do in order to bring the environment to that foundational level of security. Then security teams are able to be proactive by educating users on how and why specific actions will strengthen an environment and allow the business to move forward. It is natural to resist trusting those who tell us what we should do and should not do. We talked about that with security awareness training. Nobody wants to just be told what to do. But then when those same people then try to tell us how and why the things are, we just hesitate to trust them. Because, if a security person's like, you can't do that, then people are just like, well, go away. I don't trust you. I don't know where you're coming from. Security teams need to build trust with employees. Oftentimes, employees are afraid to self-report, but that's a really critical element in our security programs. We want people to self-report when they make a mistake or they notice an observation. But people are afraid of doing that because they're afraid they're going to be reported to their manager, or report to HR, or get fired because they clicked on a phishing email. So that people are really hesitant about that, and it's important to drive the message that no, unless you're doing something malicious, you're probably not going to lose your job. And so you need to drive that message so that you can earn that trust. Also, it's important to earn trust with the different stakeholders like IT and cloud infrastructure teams, for example. So like when I'm looking at adding a new security tool or process, I include the people from those other groups. In fact, they're part of the decision-making process of the vendor selection. Of like, yeah, we really like this vendor, we like the solution, we have the support we need, the tool's going to do what we need. So it's important to include those other teams because your IT and cloud teams are going to be the teams that are fielding the calls when there's an issue with, like, for example, your EDR tool. And if you don't have that buy-in, that you didn't include them in the initial process, they're just going to work around you to get their job done. So if there's a problem with the EDR client on a system, they'll just remove it and move on. Be like, yeah, our job's done because IT and cloud infrastructure, their job is mostly availability. And so it's really important to bring them into that fold and help them to understand and be part of that process. Another aspect is security has a false assumption that people should just believe them. This is where persuasion is needed. But before you start with persuasive arguments, you need to build a relationship with people. Now, I know it's harder. I work remotely. I do travel a fair amount. And I travel a fair amount because I want to build relationships with my peers, with the business leaders, and also just individuals in the company. So I take people out to lunch when I go to our different office locations. And I encourage you to do that as well. Build a relationship with people. If you're not able to travel and meet people in person, schedule a meeting with them. Schedule a Zoom meeting with them. Chat with them on Slack. Be like, hey, how was your long weekend, your Memorial weekend? Granted, we can't build relationships with everyone, so you got to be strategic in who you really target. Make sure you build relationship with leaders and those who are really influential, like your tech leads and people like that. So people are really uncomfortable with persuasion because they feel like persuasion is manipulating. These are actually two very different concepts. So persuasion is to advise, influence, and communicate your own belief system, whereas manipulation is you're trying to force someone's hand on something. You falsify, mislead, or you play someone for a fool. When you see someone at work playing games, you might consider it's like, are they trying to manipulate you or a situation? It's not really persuasion. So there's 5 steps to persuasion. I'm just going to briefly explain each of those. A few years ago, I actually gave an entire presentation on persuasion and using it in security. So I just wanted to introduce you to the topic and invite you to dive into this a little bit more on your own. Attention step is where you introduce the topic. Need step is a statement of the problem. Satisfaction solution step is you directly state what the solution is to the problem. Visualization step is where you help your audience understand what could happen if they don't take your suggestion. What if you just stay on your signature-based antivirus instead of going with a EDR solution, for example? What are some of the attacks that you're missing? And then action step is you state explicitly what you want the audience to do. So I invite you, there's these steps in there, and there's some books and articles out there that go much deeper into how you actually apply these steps. Okay, so going back to trust us, we are security. Is this true? Okay, is this a myth? Or is it a maybe? Okay, everybody rest on that. That's maybe. I agree. That security teams need to work hard to be able to gain that truth. So in that way, it turns into a truth in your organization. All right, so be humble. So of course, I'm going to hijack this and not do audience participation on this and say this must be true. As I referred to earlier or mentioned earlier, there are a lot of talented people in security. I learn stuff from people all the time. It can be the most senior level person on my team to the most junior level person on my team. Everybody has different perspectives and experiences, and we can learn from a lot of different people. But I see that ego gets in the way for a lot of people. That, hey, my EDR is bigger than your EDR or whatever. I mean, it's just, people just really, get an ego with that. So what I encourage is that put yourself in a subordinate position. And I know I'm a little bit tight on time here, so I'll go through this quickly. But 2 weeks ago, I was in Oregon for 10 days with an organization called Team Rubicon. So I'm not here to sell you on Team Rubicon. I'll just briefly describe what they do. So they're a veteran-founded organization that their mission is twofold. One is to connect veterans with each other, and the other is to give veterans a purpose, a means to be able to serve. And what Team Rubicon does is they respond to different disasters around the country, and they even respond to disasters worldwide with medical teams. And so my experience with going to Oregon was I wasn't around any cybersecurity people. I think I was the only cybersecurity person there. I was in a subordinate position because I was there to train and get certified on a particular area. So when I volunteer to go on a disaster operation, I can actually perform that role. And so I have to say it was very humbling because I had to take direction from instructors. And I was critiqued on how I was performing, and I was graded on that and whether or not I passed. I did pass, but so this just to encourage you of get out of your comfort zone. I understand. I mean, a lot of my personal friends are in cybersecurity. I mean, some of them are in the room today, and I consider them personal friends. We met through cybersecurity, but I encourage you to expand beyond that. And finally, be kind. And so those of you may know the name Michael Asante. Who here has heard of the Aurora Generator project that Idaho National Labs did several years ago? Oh, nobody. Oh, Mohammed, surely you've heard of it. Come on, Mohammed. So what it was is, so this was conducted at Idaho National Labs. Michael Asante was the brainchild, the thought leader on this. He's the one who came up with this project. So going back to the security awareness training, he was trying to convince people that, like world leaders, military leaders, congressional leaders, that we have a big risk with our electrical grid, that cyber attackers could attack it and take down large portions of the electrical grid. And nobody was listening to him. So what he ended up doing is he acquired this huge diesel generator, and his team plugged it into the electrical grid at Idaho National Labs. Idaho National Labs has their own electrical grid that they do for testing purposes. And what Michael and his team were able to demonstrate in 30 lines of code of what an attacker could actually do to an electrical grid if they broke in. So how the test happened was the generator was feeding electricity into the power grid, and then all of a sudden it was thrown off the electrical grid. There was like no grace to it at all. And so the generator over-revved, it recovered, but then like a second later, that threw it back on the grid. And they did this 3 times, and you can see kind of the result of the third time there, and it fried the generator. Parts were flying everywhere, black smoke spewing out of it and everything. So this is a huge thing, and Michael then gained a lot of credibility in industrial control security, and he had a very good career in that. He spoke to people all around the world on that. His last position was he was working at the SANS Institute as the director of curriculum for the industrial control security practice curriculum there, courses. And unfortunately, Michael passed away about 4 years ago. He was actually a personal friend of mine. I met him through cybersecurity, but we became personal friends as well. And so the day after he passed away, he was recognized on both floors of Congress for his work in cybersecurity. Before he had passed away, he had actually received a few different Lifetime Achievement Awards for the work that he did in cybersecurity. And then, if you search for his name on there, you can see lots of tributes that were given to him after he had passed away. So here's someone who, we have lights on today in part because of the work that Michael did. And, his work is totally it just totally supersedes what so many people have done in security. He's like one of the greatest that we ever had in the industry. But being personal friends with him, he never really talked about those accomplishments. He was just a very kind, one of the kindest people I've ever met. And I share the story about Michael Sente, not only to just honor him, my friend, but also just as a reminder that I think we should all be like Michael. We all have great accomplishments. Every one of you have accomplished something great in your life. And be proud of that, but don't let ego get in the way and get in the way of you having a relationship with other people. So I encourage you, think about Michael, be kind to others, and help our industry continue to grow. So thank you very much. Appreciate the audience participation. I'm not sure how much time we have for questions. Couple minutes? Okay, yeah, so if there's any questions in the audience as well as online. He's coming with the mic. There you go.
Okay.
Oh, she's got her notebook out, so I think she had a lot of questions.
Yeah. So you've mentioned kind of driving home the message of self-reporting. And this is something that my team has kind of gotten as feedback, that people who self-report feel scared after they self-report. So I'm wondering kind of what you've done to make your self-reporting, to foster a culture where people feel safe doing that.
Yeah, I think what has worked for me, and again, I don't know how effective that is because how many people are seeing stuff and not reporting? It's kind of hard to measure that. So, but what I've done is make sure security is a top-down approach. So in my current organization at REPAY, everybody knows that the CEO really cares about security. And so driving that message down, and then just in our security awareness training, we send out stuff once a month of just encouraging people to report and why they need to report. And you can't give any assurances that they're not going to get fired, because if they're stealing company information, they're going to get fired, or they should get fired. It is definitely a tricky thing to address with people to make them feel comfortable. But just try, just encourage people to report. People aren't going to self-report, if they're doing something malicious anyhow. So, okay. Okay, we got another question up here.
Yeah, you were talking about the security and the programs that you're putting into place, that the operational or that the people inside the company need to be able to be at the table. But I think there's also equally important for cyber folks to be at the table whenever they are looking at new processes, procedures, or software that they're bringing into the company. Speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you can set up different committees. So one is that, and people call these different things. So one is to have more an executive level cyber committee, where you have different C-level executives, and me as a CISO is there talking about security. Again, security needs to be a top-down approach in an organization. So it addresses partly through that. And then also I have like a technical cyber committee. So that's like me and my peers. I currently report to the CTO of my organization. So it's me and some of my peers, like, you know, the VPs of software development and cloud infrastructure, IT infrastructure, the CTO himself, members of my team. And we talk about like, hey, here's some of the emerging issues that we're seeing. And then people bring up, yeah, well, we're looking at a project to be able to do this to the WAF or whatever. And, you know, my team doesn't manage the WAF, but we have oversight over it. And so of course we need to know about that. So it's just, you know, a lot about relationship building and building that trust between teams. And again, you know, approaching it like I mentioned before, of that, you know, security is there to help collaborate, not to tell everybody no, that they can't do something. Okay. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you very much.